result in the Masters Tour just last week, right? Was this OTK Warlock with those nulls. So excited to see Fury continue to pilot the decks he's had success with. But again, this is going to be one of those kind of weird matchups where both players are effectively racing each other to their own win condition.
Gaby, Flow, Kept, Europe, Mage, etc. Furyhunter deep in the tank on his mulligan instead here.
Furyhunter, thinking image.
Yes.
Now, does it come as simply still down in a matchup like this to just mulligan for weapon in this Warlock deck?
I mean, I think he certainly needs Rod. You have to mulligan aggressively for Rod. It's slightly different now that the card costs 5, right? Like, part of the reasoning behind not mulliganing for expensive cards, I think the one that everyone understands is you want cheap cards in your opening hand so you can play those cheap cards early, right? That's the part that makes sense. The other part is that if you need an expensive card by the time you get to play it on curve, you don't necessarily need to mulligan super hard for it because you're going to draw 4 or 5 cards before the point that you get to it anyway, so you have more chance of hitting it naturally. But yes, this matchup is pretty much just a race, right? And your only racing tool that can possibly keep up with the speed of Mizaki Mage is that Rod. So I do believe you have to mulligan super aggressively for it.
Yeah, and that's the difference, isn't it? Where the card isn't just a higher cost mana card that is good. It's a, if I don't draw this at all, I lose.
I am dead.
Yeah, hence why you then add the draws you get because it's a 5 cost, the draws you get naturally. You add that on top of hard mulligan for it, right? To just increase chances as high as possible. But double flow for Gaby. Two players as well that we've seen very recently, two strong Mizaki Mage players. Gaby playing in the Masters. Yeah, well, yeah, it was the Masters Tour. Took a not surprising win, but a strong win against Paladin with an effective 2-turn setup with his Mizaki Mage.
Yeah, really good game.
Yeah, really just heads up play, and then Furyhunter, of course, kind of ending up playing Mizaki Mage, but going for the early deck of Lunacy in one of the coolest games we've seen this year.
Yeah.
You know, both players pretty much know what they're doing and know how to think outside the box.
Yeah, it was Mizaki Mage to Lunacy Mage, back to Mizaki Mage, all in the course in the same game, which is pretty sick to watch.
No Fury, one draw away from the big reduction, and he could get that draw right now if he wanted it, right? With Thanos and Touch.
Yeah, I think he's probably okay with just dropping it out on the board, though, instead.
I guess yeah, he won't overdraw, right? Because he'll go down and then go back.
He's going to do it.
Yeah, he's fine.
Sure.
Okay. I guess in this matchup as well, yes, there are other targets, which is fine, but it guarantees some form of healing too, right? You just get the heal while you can. The touch being brought down in mana cost doesn't really affect Furyhunter too much, again, in this matchup specifically.
Oh, interesting. Chose to go for the additional draw off the Arcane Intellect. Does make sense when you have double flow lockdown, of course. But I was wondering whether he was going to take the perfect Siphon mana there to just discount the whole hand that he already had. But makes sense to just keep on cycling here, having hit the Arcane Intellect.
Big Fury, play a Neophyte. Debate.
You've learned this lesson!
It's a trap!
You're dead next turn, you fool!
Fury not too concerned with armor right now, may as well get his combo going as quickly as possible, as we've mentioned a couple of times now. Both players are effectively racing to their OTK. Furyhunter just doing the awkward job and getting that out of the way, right? Paying so much mana for one card, but it needs to be played and to be killed before you can really kick off.
Counterspell going to come down this turn for Gaby. Did pick it up earlier as a piece of disruption. Now looks like he's going to skip it. Looks like a Brain Freeze multicaster again here instead.
Yeah, he even spent a Mana Biscuit as well, which is something to bear in mind.
Yeah, true.
With a double flow deck, you can spend Mana Biscuit, so I'm not saying it's a mistake or it's going to bite him, but it's just something to bear in mind because a lot of the Mizaki turns you see include Mana Biscuit play.
Whoa, 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 whoa. This is close. He has to pay 2 mana for both Knolls right now, right? And then he has 2 0-mana armor vendors. He has Phylactery on top of all of that. He has Skull Spirits, and then he has Drain Soul to kill one of the Knolls. And the other Knoll that he doesn't shoot can rush into the 3/4.
But the armor vendors won't die, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the armor vendors
he's basically 1 AoE damage away from being pretty cool right now. So very close, but not quite there. Fury just dumping some cards now and continuing the cycle. As we said, he's so close that if he just gets to the key cards, Moarg there helps a lot with the AoE problem. There's Tamsin that solves the AoE problem.
Has it. Yep, 100% has it now.
Gaby's got to get to something here. I mean, his whole deck basically costs 0, or the majority of it anyway.
He's just good.
He's gonna go
right?
burn.
He's just gonna go straight up burn. Yeah.
A Siphon for what?
Ignite
4?
for 5, Siphon for 4, Ruined Orb for 4, puts his opponent down to 6, and then he has Spring Water from
another
the
Siphon for 4.
Siphon for 4 again. Cram Session still available. Never mind. Mask of Cthulhu. GG.
And just like that, the Phoenix, you can never trust it when it's on the board. You never know when you're going to die.
Imagine not being a Phoenix enjoyer, Raven. Can you imagine who is on the other side of this argument at this point?
I think the whole thing started as a rumor. I don't think anyone's on the other side of it. And because every time I say this to someone, they're like, "No, I like Phoenix." I'm like, well, who is it that doesn't? Most importantly, though, great win there for Gaby. Again, as expected, especially in this matchup, one play was that one turn quicker, right? That's often what happens. And Fury got so close. He nearly had it that turn sooner, but just not quite there. Didn't have a cheapened Moarg, a Tamsin, even an additional School Spirits that was in the hand earlier to hit a reduction. Just wasn't quite there. If he had any of those extra tools, he would have been fine and would have won. But
even just imps, right? If he'd have been able to like get 4 imps out that he'd tradable once, he'd already drawn a ton of cards to be able to get it back again. Like, there were a lot of ways he could have got that done on turn 6 or 7. Agonizingly close for Furyhunter there. But Gaby recognizing sometimes, even in a deck that is named Mizaki Mage, you do not need the titular hero. You can just go all the way in with that natural spell damage from the Phoenix, and he recognized the spot perfectly.
And you even saw as well, just quickly before we move on, that Fury was using Drain Soul on his own minions, was using Touch on his own minions. So he was trying to heal to stop something like that or make it less likely to happen. Because obviously if Mizaki comes down, he's just dead, that's fine. But that kind of burn plan is possible. He did his best, but it just wasn't quite enough. We are going to be moving...
just real quick, just one last thing to touch on. Like, the debate you could maybe get into is whether playing his 2 0-mana armor vendors might have changed anything. Like, once he played the other backfire, and then he hit Moarg, Tamsin, etc., and he had all that overkill that he knew he could be able to have like Tamsin Phylactery kind of deal going on. Did he still need the 2 0-mana armor vendors? Was that perhaps worth throwing out onto the board to try and potentially live for one more turn? But I think that is something that I would have to go back and look at in great detail before I can actually throw it out as genuine criticism. Just a talking point.
And just quickly, one more thing before we... No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
Gaby could be on...
Well, actually, now that you mentioned it...
Yeah. Don't start. I know you're doing the TJ to just keep interrupting me. Kaz Armor Druid for Gaby. Again, pretty much the go-to list that you saw there. We weren't talking about it, but you've seen it before, and you're about to see it in this match. And I will just triple check. It's going to be Furyhunter jumping over to his mage now as well. So see if he can get a win under his belt there to even up the series with both mages out of the way. And then we'll be moving on to where the lineups actually differ, Sottle. So obviously the Warlock from Furyhunter and the Warrior with the Druid and Priest on Gaby's side.
Indeed, and here we are again. One flurry, one hot streak, one ice barrier this time, but basically everything else core in there. As to what we were talking about before, multicaster coming in, Siphon Mana coming in, but very much the same style of deck that it has been for quite some time at this point, based around that Mizaki engine, even though if that previous game was the very first time you'd seen Mizaki Mage in action. First off, where have you been? What have you been doing with your life? Why isn't it just watching Hearthstone Esports all day, every day? Like and subscribe, comment below, etc., etc. However, you do generally need Mizaki to win the game with the deck called Mizaki Mage, so it is generally important to the core strategy. Yes.
I see it. That card. Flow, of course, in the opening hand. We're going to quickly get to the point where we just don't mention it anymore. But both players...
I feel like we've been saying that for like a year and a half already, and yet...
I think we stopped towards the end of last year, but now that it's been, you know, what's felt like an eternity until we return to Grandmasters, we've got to go again.
But it is important in this context because, of course, whether or not Fury has flow in his hand is the good boy test for Furyhunter. It's whether or not he is currently being a good boy in the eyes of me, who controls whether he gets his flows. So clearly, currently, Furyhunter is being a good boy.
Yeah, and currently Gaby is just doing what he wants to do with Druid. Look at this opening, gets the ramp off, has Wild Growth to follow up, and then double Moonlit. Honestly, for me, close to the best card in the deck, or at least top 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely up there.
The kind of dead draw of Inner Fate matters less here for Gaby, since he did have that turn locked and loaded. Yori now, oh, glanced at the man and saw it was 4. For a second, I was like, is this coin Mizaki? Is he just going for the big play? He can't answer minions this early. Mizaki, go! Best in Shell gives draw options to just cycle it. Yell of Onyxia is a decent card by itself, but again, against exactly Mage is good enough. Does have Arbor up, though.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was wondering if he would just perhaps go for the tester, just to say, well, I mean, I can play scale. If they fail the fire sale test, I'm just going to Arbor up and kill them at that point, which could have potentially made a lot of sense.
You been practicing your rhymes in the break zone?
No. Whatever I did was accidental. I have no idea.
Fail, sale.
Oh, really? Okay, no.
Yeah. Play the scale to test for fire sale or fail or something you said.
Okay.
Gaby's going to do something similar to playing the scale now, which is just build a board with that Arbor up. It's about as good as he's got. Again, these are some of the few times when you see Druid struggle, is when the card draw's not there alongside the ramp. So you do just have to make something work, right? Gaby can't keep passing until he draws a good card, right? He's got to put Fury under some kind of pressure.
Yeah, probably just Guild Trader at this point.
I got it all.
Clear up some of the board with First Flame. Yeah, I like this. Resist all damage here. 0 mana First Flame for 1 mana Second Flame. Take 0 damage, set up, put a threat in play that could actually be extremely beneficial next turn if it's unable to be dealt with, which is very possible.
Oh, and another Feral Rage. I mean, I've seen better draws, Sottle. This is a very, very slow game here for Gaby. He had all the ramp and what appeared to be a very, very strong follow-up with double Moonlit, but
yeah,
just none of the goods afterwards.
Oh, Biscuit now. More 0 mana spells coming into hand as well. Mizaki stacked up on the far left. 2 Ignites and a Runed Orb locked and ready to go as well on the following turn.
And also just barrier this turn to just ignore the Treants, right, if he really wanted to.
Yeah, I think he will still probably clear a bit of hand space out here.
Yeah, which is fine, yeah. It's just the option was there for him to just soak the damage.
Still needs quite a lot of mana to just play the burn spells that I'm talking about. Like, just Mizaki plus Runed Orb plus Ignite Ignite is 10 mana at this point, right? If he doesn't find hot streaks and so on. So even with Conjure Mana Biscuit, he's a little bit short of getting started right now, and he doesn't have the card draw to support. So he does still need a couple of extra turns to delay, which is why he's still paying so much attention to the board state.
Yeah, and because of that, another mid. Oh, going Lunacy is now the time.
I don't think so, Raven. No.
What was I saying? Okay, yeah, with such a horrible turn from Gaby that Fury just saw, he's more than comfortable to do the setup turn, right? Get the other flow played, stack some of this, make some hand space, get the mana biscuit played so he has a 0 cost plus mana card, and I think next turn we might well see him pop off. I'd love to know if Furyhunter's chuckling at the deck of Lunacy.
Goes low.
Oh! Bloom. Just a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah. Alright, Fury says go time. Cram session locked, loaded, ready to go. Primordial studies as well picked up, using that brain freeze as early as possible so it can actually be used without killing anything. And he's going to get these ignites in the deck and go fishing.
Pick a Phoenix as well. Matter at all, but he picked it.
Yep.
Pretty interesting there. Did Fury not play the Ignite because that was 2 mana and not less than 2 mana? So he held off on that second Ignite just to retain some more mana to give him more options going forward?
Yeah, I believe so. Because he has double flow on the rest of his deck, right? He doesn't want to commit to the idea of spending 2 mana on an Ignite when that doesn't necessarily have to be the case with the options that he has still coming. But you can see with the double discounted deck, the rest of his draws were just going to be so disgusting in that spot. Animations all over the place. The desync is real, but the result does not change. Furyhunter is going to square up the series. And that's 2 of the world's best on Mazaki Mage, going back-to-back and picking up 2 very clean wins.
Yeah, and that's one of those games for Gaby where you just instantly just throw it out of your memory bank. It just doesn't matter because, yes, he had a great opening, but he just got nothing. He basically drew absolutely air just towards the mid to end of the game. So there's nothing you can do. You're going to lose against, the other side of the board is Furyhunter having access to flows and a lot of card draw, which means, yes, you are losing that game. Both players at 1-1 now, though. Both players having Mage off the table now that they're both won with it. And I believe Furyhunter is going to be locking in his Warlock against Gaby's drum roll, because I don't know yet. We don't have a drum roll button? Okay, then.
What's going on? What kind of rinky-dink operation is this?
Against Druid, there we go.
All right, so back on the Druid this time. Again, a little bit more difficult for the Warlock to go fast enough to do that kind of thing that Fury did to Gaby in that game. And at the same time, there's a little bit more ways to play around the LTK combo, because there's something that Druid does very well, is gain armor, but just gaining armor usually isn't enough against both of those combos, the Mazaki combo or the Owl combo. But there's another thing that Druid's very good at doing, and that's putting massive minions in play. And gaining armor and playing massive minions both help you resist the Owl combo on the other side. So Druid does have a little bit more game to resist what Warlock's trying to do in this matchup. However, if Gaby has anything like the draw that he had in the previous game, then that is still going to be way too slow. You have to start doing oppressive things as quickly as possible when you're playing Druid in this current meta.
Yeah, to sum up, Druid can resist the Warlock damage versus a lot of classes just simply cannot, right? Like, there's no other way about it. Kicking it off, though, Furyhunter does not have access to the weapon quite yet, but as we mentioned earlier, there is still time, of course, with that being a 5 cost. Gaby going to go for the Moonlit to start getting some draw, and most importantly, probably looking for ramp soon, because that's one of the things he is missing versus the previous game, whereas this time he has the threat, but not the ramp.
Yeah, skipped out on the overgrowth there specifically to pick up the Kazakhstan, which was ideal, and now this time finds the overgrowth in perfect time, and now this is going to ramp very quickly towards a hand where he can play Kazakhstan with Solar Eclipse in hand, with a tradable in hand. If he can find maybe one more source of card draw from his deck, he's going to be in wonderful position to just do very degenerate things with a Kaz deck. Oh, I thought that was the other Solar Eclipse for a second. I was like, wow, that's even better.
That was super interesting, actually. This game is going at a bit of a lightning pace.
Yeah.
But the fact that he got offered Guff and went for the Overgrowth was really, really interesting because Guff isn't quite as smooth a pan out as what Gaby's doing now with Overgrowth.
Yes.
But Guff is a much better just card in general for the game after Kaz has been played.
Yes. Yeah, I think you have nailed the pros and cons. Like, he doesn't have the smooth curve of just Overgrowth the very next turn that way, but yeah, when you have Guff played already, obviously, if you ever need to draw cards, if you didn't get the treasure you wanted to try again, you just have a button you can press that does that for you. So that is a huge, huge deal.
Furyhunter back on the stage now where he has to think about hand space. One of the harder things with this deck, honestly, is yes, once you learn the OTK combo, you've learned it. Doesn't really change too much, but the actual how, when, and what to dump hand-wise can be pretty difficult because, like, even with this, like, touch is normally an easy one to go, but cards like coil, well, it doesn't really dump unless you coil something that doesn't die, right? So it can be tricky to manage sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Does find Rod on curve, though. That is the most important thing for sure. Ooh.
Especially when you want to open up hand space for backfire and for Tamsin. Gale. He does take control of the board. There is a School Spirits here, but again, with 0 reductions and going into turn 5, it's a great time to put loads of pressure on board from Gaby because now Fury has to decide. Does he want to let these whelps live and play and progress his own game plan? Or does he want to take a turn off playing School Spirits? And the problem is, he's going to know this is now going into turn 8. But then does he want to play a Rune Mythal Rod going into an 8-8 next turn? It is something he has to worry about.
Prayer hands coming out from Furyhunter.
Opposed to the jazz hands from Super Fake.
Unfortunately for you, those prayers are not being answered. And the Kaz is being jammed. Underwhelming first options, I would say, for the kind of situation he's looking for. This is not going great so far.
Nope.
Continues to not be going great.
Yeah, Holy Book, one of the best or worst treasures, depending on matchup.
Yikes.
Big weapon.
So bad. Was that 0 damage?
If you're talking about burn spells, yes. Yes. Yeah. The weapon, technically, 1 mana, deal 3.
Yeah, sure.
You can just re-roll these, Subtle.
I think he might.
If he didn't pick minions, right?
Yeah.
Furyhunter does have a way to clean this up, but again, it's delayed even more. The weapon still not live. No additional card draw in hand either. Again, I don't know what treasures he's picked. If he's picked any minions, oh, it would be yellow, right? So he has picked minions.
Yeah, so he's got a minion in there.
He's got 2 minions in there.
True. All right.
Terrible.
Sure. Yeah.
Has already seen a School Spirits as well, which is something positive.
I have a wish for the way this game ends, which it absolutely isn't, because Fury's probably too smart for this. Turn 7, Tempo Owl, get it played, jam it on the board. Ancient Reflections.
Oh, I'm with you.
Don't think that's going to happen. I'm sure that's something that Fury will think about.
I've seen Furyhunter misplay before, but it's not in Hearthstone. It's in a different game we play.
Yeah,
so,
very true.
Unlikely is the word I'm going to use that happens. I would love it though, because it means we are starting to see a lot of great games today based on that one card from Kaz.
Dude, that I saw. Oh, it was so good. Ancient Reflections I saw.
What more do you want?
Grimoire.
Yeah, Furyhunter kind of dealing with a very tricky turn, right? Like, this is not really the last few turns, honestly, you want to make with this deck, but he's being forced into it, and look how slow it's forced him to be, right? The weapon's still not equipped, which obviously means no reductions, only 5 cards in hand. It's been a long time, Sol, that I've seen a Warlock with only 5 cards in hand, unless it's literally the turn they win the game.
Yeah. But he's had the ability because he's been backed up by just having Null in play, which, you know, reminder, this is just a card that is not necessarily in everyone's version of this deck, but Furyhunter is a big fan of. Because he's just had that 5/4 attacking every turn. Yes, yeah. Raven, I know. He's going to Ancient Reflections, his Wax Rager. I know.
I want to say it.
Okay. Go ahead. You can say it. It's fine.
You did it. There you go.
Hey, he did.
Probably not too afraid of dying, right? Thinking about this. Wondered he did have the opportunity to bloom out the Moontouch Amulet.
Well, now there's 7 Wax Rages in play, so there's a pretty good chance that the Ancient Reflections isn't going to be super relevant in this situation.
Yep. Double Moontouch, though, is going to be huge. Nice armor gain. Does
9 damage.
Does Gaby just trade into the Owl at any point here?
I think so.
So otherwise he's taking 8+, right? Because he might, Furyhunter might get the attack with the Owl and then kill the Owl.
Yeah.
And just because it's unlikely doesn't mean it wouldn't happen, and the Owl could hit another 8 damage to face.
Alright, looks like he's going to full trade if he's going to start doing it this way.
Time waits for no one.
Oh wow, he's leaving the Owl up instead of the Moarg. Interesting. Yeah, important. You want to get those attacks through first, of course. Like, you want to turn all of your 1/1s into 5/1s. You want to trade into everything. And if you're committing to not killing the Owl, then you want to make sure you attack into the Moargs with the small ones first before the big one. That makes sense.
The Owl's Death Rattle will go off second, right?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah, it came in play even after the Ancient Reflections, right? So there's no sequence.
So obviously at this point, like, hit face School Spirits with the Moarg. Like, what does that do? That's pretty important.
Oh.
Okay. Never mind.
It didn't matter, of course, because there was still going to be 35 damage on board on the other.
But we learned a thing.
Yeah, that is strange. Because it did happen in that order, right? Wax Rager came down first, Ancient Reflections was on the same turn, and then the Owl was played in response to that? That's what happened, isn't it?
I think so. No, yeah, because the Owl wouldn't have just sat and punched face for a couple of turns, right, on the Wax Rager turn. So, yeah, I think that was right. Maybe we're just going crazy. We are edging towards the end of our day here in the European Grandmasters, but Furyhunter went for it, and I do think, although it was a very strange game with Gaby especially not getting the key treasures, generally he did a great job of pushing Furyhunter away from his win condition, right? He put forward boards in the way of the Mithril Rod turns, whether it was turn 5 or turn 6 even, that Furyhunter bailed on it. And that level of pressure, obviously with the help of Wax Rager and duplicates, just helped out with just reducing Furyhunter's ability to draw cards, to reduce the mana cost, and to even get to the OTK. And you see the level of desperation Furyhunter was at, that he just tried to go for something, but it obviously did not work out.
Yeah, now we're going to be on this Miracle Priest from Gaby with the Warlock still left in play for Furyhunter. We don't see any of the Hysteria stuff hanging around in Furyhunter's deck. Of course, this in the Owl version, just very trimmed down, combo-focused version instead. So dealing with huge minions could be a significant problem for that deck if it does face up against it. The other remaining deck, I believe, is the Warrior that he still has to win with, which does have many of those same problems as well, unless they can get up to massive shield slams.
Yeah, and Gaby choosing to rock, I believe, if you base it off average lists, like -1 Fortitude and the Horn of Rathian as his additional card. We've seen a lot of these priests not run Horn of Rathian. But I do think it's a good card because it's just another tutor card that you can pull a minion with, right? Sometimes you get the 2/1s when you pull Malagos, but a lot of the time it is just 3 mana, draw you good card, which is a reasonable card to put in your deck.
You're not always going to get the 2/1s. You shouldn't really expect them. I mean, as always, you know, sometimes you're going to get the Horn and end up disappointed. So, you know, don't expect too much.
The wrong time of day for that, so.
What are we talking about?
Nothing. We talk about Hearthstone, my friend.
Oh, good.
But yes, a lot of the pressure will be on Gaby here to build a board relatively early and threaten Furyhunter. Because if not, then Furyhunter gets to put his feet up, right? Sit back and try and cycle to his combo very, very quickly indeed.
Armor! Lightly used armor.
Both players get into decent cards, though. The Rune Mythal Rod is in Furyhunter's hand again.
Yeah,
He's got to get to it. And unless something goes terribly wrong, I feel it's likely that you can coin this out on 4 against Priest.
Ooh, very nice.
What did he hit?
Let's
Oh,
find the
nice.
Mally.
Yeah.
To clear this up. So he is 1 Gift of Luminance or 2nd Nazmani away from a wonderful time at this point.
I think
Gets hold of either of those things, he's going to be basically discounting Mally down to 0 and then drawing a full hand again.
Do you like the null here? It definitely has upsides, doesn't it?
Yes. Even if he does just go tap here, though, like he's going to be able to get that damage with Rush on the next turn anyway for 1, probably, if he really needs it to be able to deal with a Nazmani, for example. But just as a pressure tool, as a 5/4 that can actually hit face, it's kind of a big deal as well.
Yes, okay, he's holding off. Maybe he doesn't coin out the Rod. Obviously, this is based on Gaby playing something this turn. It doesn't mean that Furyhunter's always locked into playing Null either that turn or this turn coming up. Well, those all suck, don't they? At least in a matchup way, not necessarily in an outcome way, right? Like Shadow of Death for a null, great, fine, whatever. But yeah, generally speaking, you don't want cards that interact with your opponent's minions. You want cards that are just cheap and will help you continually buff. Maybe Shadow Word Devour's just fine, because maybe there's minions on the other side of the board, maybe there's not, but you can play it, right? And it's cheap. Don't hate it.
Yeah, it was the only option for me. Gaby was deliberating, but I would have been amazed if he'd have gone any other direction there with it. The fastest hard pass you've ever seen in your life.
One thing that is interesting to watch when players are piloting Miracle Priest is what turn they commit. Because there are so many different times you can do it and so many different circumstances based on your hand, of course, that you can almost make arguments for playing Nazmani on most of the turns of the game, right? Or holding off for a lot of the turns as well. There's like always arguments for and against.
Job's done.
Yeah, right now he just doesn't, you know, he has no method of generating extra in hand right now, which is the problem, right? No card draw, no gift to create a second Nazmani, no second Nazmani itself. Like, he just really needs to find something that will allow him in one pop-off turn to get that Mally down, if not to 0, at least to, you know, 2 or 3, so he can just jam it the next turn and potentially win the game with it. But right now, it's just, you know, 1 spell for 1 mana is not really getting him anywhere at the moment.
It's the big owl. Furyhunter only a couple of draws away from double reducing this whole hand.
Yep.
Gaby's going to need something quick, either, as you mentioned, a duplication. The big... Oh, does he ever double touch here to heal? Because again, removing the potential card draw from Gaby is huge.
Fair. I can see that.
Armor. Lightly used armor.
Now Gaby can draw a card with Gift of the Naru.
Yes. Oh, that's Luminance off the top, I think. Yes, it is.
That's the time. Go, go, go.
This absolutely has to be go time.
Bear in mind though, Furyhunter did keep, or does have in hand, should I say, as opposed to did keep, double Moarg and double touch. So it is a lot of potential removal with that null as well. But it's going to be enough with a truly big potential pop-off turn from Gaby. 0 mana though.
Having to use Bless here as well, just to, you know, continue the cycle, get cards out of hand, get these discounts going is not exactly ideal.
Yeah. And even that Gift of the Naru hitting the other Bless is horrible, isn't it?
Yeah, shrug from Gaby. I think he knows he had to go in that position, but he needed a very lucky sequence of draws and discounts to be able to get anything down to cheap enough to really keep up in this game. If these Nazmani stick, then yeah, maybe, but as Raven was just saying, that's very unlikely with the amount of removal that Furyhunter still has at his disposal now.
Yeah, even the benefit of the 1/1 sticking on board, right? So that's one Divine Shield just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
More bones to gnaw on.
Double Moarg, Drain Soul, Touch, it's all coming together.
And trade. Yep. Drain Soul will take care of one. You just ping off the shield with the touch and then trade the remaining null.
Or just Touch again, right?
Or just touch again. Yeah, sure. I don't hate it.
Because now, if anything's played, like say from a Draconic Studies, there's 5 damage already on board to pressure from the null. That wouldn't be there if you traded.
Dumps the Desperate Prayer and then throws up a Desperate Prayer of his own, looking for some kind of win condition to get out of this one. He will corrupt his Insight, which will now draw him the other Nazmani. He'll be able to come down. He can try and throw out some chains here if he really wants to. But yeah, I think this is smart, just ending the turn with the Shard of the Naru instead, making the 4/12 significantly harder to deal with in this situation.
Yeah, and Fury has used a lot of resources, right, and a lot of time removing these minions. So it's not like Fury's able to instantly combo to win the game now. So Gaby does have some level of time, and I wonder how likely is it, do you think, that Priest can make big enough minions? I don't even mean this specific game, but just in general, to survive a combo. Is that even possible?
With the Moargs gone? Maybe. I will give it the hardest of maybes, because the problem you have when they still have Moargs left is that, you know, you put a bunch of 12 health minions on board, but by the time they've gone Moarg School Spirits, that's cut so much health off your side of the board anyway that it ends up being fairly irrelevant. But since both Moargs had to be used for the clearing turn, it does at least give Gaby some chance of being able to stick awkwardly sized things in the way of the combo.
And this is going to be big. He's still got 3 mana left.
Yep.
Which means I imagine this second Elic is almost guaranteed to come down. He's obviously going Gift of Luminance on the Nazmani that already has an Elic on it as well. So tons of death rattle. If he could have done this a turn or so earlier, like that's how you win. But this is so many stats, the Divine Shields, everything. He can Devour again to actually kill the Moargs.
Yes, he can.
Which I think is a big deal to protect the shields.
Yeah, and then he has Psyche Split again at the end of this. Oh, it's getting so big, Raven.
Here's a question, Saul. Does he actually Devour to kill his own 1/1 now at the end of the turn? He does, right? Yeah, to make the Elic. Yeah, this is really nice.
Just makes it bigger, yeah.
Well, he's got a whole other person's health total times in 2 minions, right?
Can
Fury
you
has to
kill 3 of me?
Yeah, Fury has to kill like 3.2 Gabbies right now.
Yeah. We did this yesterday.
Big ask.
Yeah, 7 times 8 times 2 is 112. But then there's Divine Shields to deal with, there's Death Rattles to deal with, there's imperfect breakpoints to deal with that as well. And he has to do it right now because otherwise he's just dead.
More bones to gnaw on.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I don't even know if this is going to do it subtle.
No.
Lovely viewers at home, we are all going to be in this together. We're just going to sit and watch because I honestly just do not know if this works or if this will work, should I say. What I will say is it's Furyhunter making the best effort he can, right? Either this works, he wins, or it doesn't, he loses. It's all he can do. There's no other play than the play Furyhunter's making right now.
Grimoire first. This is smart. This does the shields, and then he can use the Blood Mage and the School Spirits to actually do genuine damage
Oh, he got it.
to the minions. It's looking like this has ended up being enough.
Fury's nodding and not looking angry, therefore I think... Wait, did he just...
Oh, forget about the minions. Just ignore them, idiot. Doesn't even matter.
Elephants turn up a little bit too late. Furyhunter's going to win that game and even up the series. And what a game it was, sort of like. It looked like Gaby was out once Fury looked like it stabilized a little bit. But then that delayed Fury enough for Gaby to start fighting back. He made the ultimate board, but the turn was done by Fury and it was enough damage. Wow. I'm happy with that game, and I didn't even play it.
Yeah, that was a pretty sweet game. It looked like Gaby was down and out because he was just going way too slow, and then he had to use double bless just to get the discounts rolling, which ultimately is what cost him the win, right? Not that that was a mistake. The fact that he was forced to do that kind of left him in a position where he made 30 health minions. If he'd have had a bless in his hand, he would have just straight up won the game. And the fact that he couldn't do that just gave Furyhunter the opportunity to go for it. And it did look like, because of the smart way he went about it, using the Grimoire essentially for overkill, he didn't need to use the Grimoire as part of the combo, but he used the Grimoire to just cut off the Divine Shields, then had School Spirits with the Tamsin, each doing 3 damage to the board, cutting that down. And then, of course, the other part you have to factor in, which we kind of failed to do, is you don't have to kill all the minions first before you actually kill the face, right? Like, sometimes you do just get more 8 damages going to face. And that scenario where he'd AoE'd everything else and there was just the 2 1132s or whatever they ended up being, that was the best odds of hitting face, because once he split them open, obviously that was then duplicating into the 4 elephants. So the fact that he got multiple rolls to go face off that first one may have been a big deal, but I think the way it broke down, the damage would have got there regardless.
Well, we're going to end this series one way or the other with Gaby on Miracle Priest once again and Furyhunter on this Control Warrior. And again, unlike the Charge Warrior we've been seeing from Yala, this is basically like 28 removal cards. Kaz and Nixia, right? Ray Boss and Nixia is playing. Yes. Right. So it's a really tricky one, honestly, because there's so much removal. There's a Blade Storm in there, double brawls. It is a lot, and it is good against Priest, but when I've played both sides of this, sometimes Priest does its thing, and then the Warrior just doesn't have the right answer. For example, if Priest makes 2 huge minions, and Warrior only has Brawl, well, 1 lives, so you're in trouble. Yeah. And then Blade Storm, that obviously Gaby is easily a good enough player to not make a multi-minion Blade Storm available for Fury, which means, once again, that a big minion probably lives, right? So it's all just going to be about like that dance between these 2 players of how the removal actually lines up against any boards Gaby can make.
And I think Blade Storm specifically in this matchup, when I've played it, is one of the most interesting cards to consider, because there's tons of ways to play around it, but you do have to be doing it very deliberately so, right? Like, you can Psyche split second to last and then buff only one of your minions, for example, whereas normally you would do that the other way around because you just want both minions to be as big as possible. You can use Shadow Word Devour to create some inequality between the minions that you have on your board so that you play around those Bladestorm breakpoints. There's lots of things that you can do to make it happen, but you do have to always have that card in mind, and don't just make 2/5/8 Divine Shielded Nazmanis, because that is the dream scenario for the Warrior.
Yeah, we'll just quickly shout out before we move on is that there is only one Bladestorm in Furyhunter's list. So, yes, obviously Gaby has to be aware of it, but it is a one-off. Once one's gone, it's done, dusted, finished.
Cool.
So far, though, Furyhunter is starting to stack some armor. So he's ready for these shield slams. He also, again, when I say shield slams, I also mean a Nixian Drake as well, because it is a shield slam on a stick. Or a shield slam with wings, I guess you could argue.
Okay. Pop off prepared.
And that, something Undying, was it? I always forget the name of the
Amulet of Undying, I think.
Yeah. That is important to remember, because again, in this matchup with so much removal, the Draconic Studies are very important. And what you get out of them is very important.
So you're saying we should grab some Proto Drakes and start a party.
Exactly.
No payoff right now. Like his hand is prepared. He could absolutely pop off and he could absolutely get all the discounts, but there's currently no payoff for it. No Draconic Studies, no Malagos, no Draconic Studies into Malagos, etc.
Yep.
There's just nothing available to really make this a good turn, apart from the fact that you're putting a bunch of very chunky Nazmanis in play if you go for it.
It's also a very hard thing to break through your own mental game in a matchup like this, because if Gaby plays a Nazmani and makes it big but not ridiculous, right? Just big, it's probably dead, right? Because if you, depending on the size, there's potentially, the deck runs 4 shield slams and Fury has 18 armor. There's other ways for removal as well, whether it's Bladestorm or even Brawl, because it's past turn 5. So if you multi-minion this, then Brawl can be a little bit scary. So very, very difficult decision to make. But Gaby, again, choosing to go with the better outcome of high health minions and only 2 of them. So Brawl isn't as punishing. But as I said, the deck runs 4 shield slams and Furyhunter got to sit on 18 armor, sorry. So yeah, it's a tough one. But Furyhunter answers quite easily to the first wave of threats. Oh.
There's a Dragonmaw Skystalker. As we mentioned, that Amulet of Undying has been traded twice now.
And this is a tricky decision, honestly. Fury's got the choice now. Does he play Kaz and try and win the game and be aggressive in his overall game plan? Or does he hold off and enjoy the fact he has Brawl, he has other removal, he's got still got Bladestorm and Shield Slams in his deck, and he can just keep killing things? Because he's beaten now basically 2 waves worth of threats from Gaby to an extent. And it's a tricky choice, honestly, because I could actually be swayed to either side there from Furyhunter.
Okay.
Because you can't argue that if Furyhunter just gets Kazakus and gets Embers, Locus, and another burn card, he probably just kills Gaby.
If the equation is different this turn when he just has an absolutely empty board to play into, I think it might be. Yeah.
Well, now it's just an 8/8 as well, isn't it?
Exactly.
Now you start to look at things a little bit differently. And like I said, he has Brawl, he has double shield shatter. Does have card draw with the cutting class as well, which is very nice. Lines up pretty well with just accelerating the game plan. The Exerciser must have been a pick there, surely.
Mr. Motivator, as I like to call it.
Now, in this matchup, Saul, Embers or Holy Book?
Oh, I mean, you're never convincing me not to take Embers. I don't care what the matchup is. I was going to say, like, you know, on that debate of, you know, do you want to delete a bunch of removal from your deck by playing Kazakhstan? You can pick removal cards, you know? Like, you can put really overpowered removal cards back in, and I think there was probably a bit of that in those selections, but Embers equals Embers. Like, that's the one I'm taking every single time, I think. Also, locusts equals locusts.
Can't technically argue with anything you've said.
Yeah.
Another Luminance. Yeah, and this is what I was talking about earlier, where the Draconic Studies are super important because Gaby gets to make multiple levels of threats, right?
Wow, okay, he just gives it up. I'm guessing we didn't see the dragons, but I'm guessing he waited to see a Kazakhstan as one of his 3 dragons, and then if they weren't Kazakhstan, he just gave it up, which is a very viable play to take in that spot, I think. Again, very similar to the Blythe situation. You know, these young kids and their concedes, it's not that they're being salty and rage quitting, it's just they understand when they're 100% beaten and they know what the out they have to check is, so they check it, it doesn't work, they scoop. That's just how it works.
They value their time. If they know they're going to lose, they lose there and then. But a huge congratulations to Furyhunter. A great way, honestly, to start his first week in Grandmasters. I know he's worked towards Grandmasters for a long time, but to just make it to top 4, great already, right? I'm sure he can continue to do great. But also, you know, beating Gaby in top 8 on stream, it's got to feel nice for your first season. Gaby, who spent his first season stomping every other player around pretty much. It's got to be good to take a victory there and then. But look at that top 4, Subtle. We have RDU versus Superfake. Can this lineup from Superfake go all the way? He's going to be matching up against something a little bit different. There's no slow, clunky decks, really, from RDU. So it's going to be put to the test there for Superfake. But then we have Blythe versus Furyhunter. Again, a similar vein matchup of Furyhunter versus Gaby that we just finished today on. It's going to be great.
It is, yeah. I do think this matchup against RDU is going to be the biggest test for Superfake's lineup so far. We will dig into it overnight and take a look at some of the lineups he beat to get here, whether he's just been doing it exclusively against Warriors or whether he's had the lineup function against other people before we get into that tomorrow. But then, yeah, Blythe versus Furyhunter, again, very, very similar, as you were saying, to what we had. Imagine if Furyhunter wins his first week in Grand